All right, so today we're going to be looking at Unit 6, Notes number 8. And our goal today is I will be able to create a perfect square trinomial. That's going to be our goal. So the goal of this to create these perfect square trinomials is going to be a different way to solve a quadratic function. So remember, we're looking for where it hits the x-axis. Okay, and this is going to be another method because there are some quadratics that aren't factorable. So this is what we're going to do when we can't factor. Okay, so looking at this, okay, we have to be able to do some like beginning skills before we can do this whole process. The whole process is called completing the square. So in order to complete the square, we have to be able to do this first. Okay, so we're going to practice this and then you'll see how it gets applied tomorrow. So we're creating perfect square trinomials. So a perfect square trinomial comes from squaring a binomial. So if we look at this, a perfect square trinomial comes from squaring a binomial. Our goal is to make these perfect square trinomials. So we're going to talk about that first. So this right here is our binomial. Okay, and we're going to square this. So this is where you have to use our box. Okay, remember our box method where we have x minus 5 and x minus 5. We're going to fill in all of our boxes. So x times x gives me x squared. X times negative 5 gives me negative 5x. X times negative 5 gives me negative 5x again. Negative 5 times negative 5 gives me a positive 25. Combine our like terms on that diagonal. We'll have x squared. Negative 5 minus 5 gives me negative 10x plus 25. This right here is what we call a perfect square trinomial. Call that because, hey, that 25 is a perfect square. We're going to do the same thing again. So I have x plus 7 squared. This is our binomial. So we're going to make our box. We're going to square it. So I'll have x and 7, x and 7. X times x will give me x squared. X times 7 gives me 7x. X times 7 gives me 7x again. And 7 times 7 gives me 49. Combine like terms on that diagonal. We'll have x squared. 7 plus 7 gives me plus 14x plus 49. This right here is our perfect square trinomial. Okay, so our goal is to be creating these perfect square trinomials. That's our goal today, is how can I make that? Because we're going to need that for a method for solving a quadratic, which is called completing the square. And that's going to be the process to make those perfect square trinomials. So we have to be able to make the trinomials before we can do that process tomorrow. So to create a perfect square trinomial, it's 3 easy steps. Okay, so first we're going to chop the b in half. When we're looking at a quadratic, it always goes, there's an a up front, it always goes ax squared, bx, and c. So we're always going to take that number in the middle, chop it in half. So if we look at our example, our b value here is 6. So we're going to start by doing 6 divided by 2, which is going to give me 3. Okay, so we did b divided by 2. Step number 2, square the result of step 1. So then we're going to square that. And that's going to give me 3 squared is 9. And then step 3, replace the c with the result of step 2. So this 9 goes where the c is. So I'll have x squared plus 6x plus 9. And that right there is going to be our perfect square trinomial. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing today. That whole process right there. That's going to be our big goal. All right, so looking at our first examples, we're just finding those c values. So we're going to do this whole process right here to create our perfect square trinomials. So step 1, chop the b value in half. Our b value is the number in the middle. So we're going to do 16 over 2. And then step 2 is we square that. So I always like to write it like this first and then just simplify it. So 16 divided by 2 gives me 4. Oops. 4. Oh my gosh, that's still ugly. 4 squared. And then 4 squared is 16. So the 16. Wow, I can't math. Wow, I am so sorry, guys. 16 divided by 2 is not 4, it's 8. I hope we were in class. I hope if we were in class, somebody would have corrected me. That's rough. This is what happens when I'm gone for this long. So 16 divided by 2 gives me 8. Then 8 squared is 64. That's what we plug in here. And that's our new c value. Okay, so this is our perfect square trinomial. Wow. Sorry, guys. So we're going to do the same thing with b. Hopefully I do my math right. We're going to take that b value, so it's going to be negative 4 divided by 2, and then we're going to square it. So negative 4 divided by 2 gives me negative 2. We're going to square the negative 2. Remember, if you're using a calculator, you have to use parentheses. So negative 2 squared gives me positive 4. And that's what's going to go in for my c value. Do the same thing with part c. Same process. So we're going to take that b value, negative 8, divided by 2, and then we're going to square it. Negative 8 divided by 2 gives me negative 4 squared. And negative 4 times negative 4 gives me a positive 16. So that's what's going to go in my blank. Okay, so these are all those c values. Those are those perfect square trinomials. Okay, and we're going to have to be able to do that for our skill tomorrow. All right, flipping over to the back page. Same skills. Okay, but now we're going to throw in a little bit of factoring. Just those same skills we're practicing over and over though. So it says write the c value that completes the square and then factor each and write as your squared binomial. Because our end goal, guys, is that we want all of our answers to look like this. That's what we want our answers to look like. If you think about our warm-up, that's because, hey, we can take the square root of that and solve it. So that's our goal. All right, so first we're going to make our c values that go here. So we're going to take our b value, divide it by 2. We're going to square it. 8 divided by 2 gives me 4. We're going to square that. 4 squared gives me 16. So that's what's going to go in the blank. So from here, now it says we need to factor the perfect square trinomial. So I'm going to rewrite this just so it's a little bit easier to read. I suggest you do too. So x squared plus 8x plus 16. And we want to factor this. So we want to think what's going to add to give me 8. But when I multiply it, I get 16. Okay, hopefully you're thinking it's 4. So 4 plus 4 gives me 8. 4 times 4 gives me 16. So we're going to write this as x plus 4 and x plus 4. Anytime we have the same binomial repeated twice, we can always write it as x plus 4 squared. All right. Okay, so that's going to be our goal, to go from there to there. All right, notice there's lots of 4s, and that's okay. That's a good thing. All right, looking at the next one. We have x squared minus 6x, and we need to find our c value for our perfect square trinomial. So we're going to have negative 6 divided by 2, and we're going to square it. Negative 6 divided by 2 will give me negative 3 squared. And negative 3 squared will give me a positive 9. Okay, so step 2. We need to factor the perfect square trinomial. So I'm going to rewrite it. So I'll have x squared minus 6x plus 9. And we're going to factor it. So we need to think what's going to add to give me negative 6. But when I multiply, I get a positive 9. Hopefully you're thinking that it's negative 3 and negative 3. And so we're going to rewrite this as x minus 3 and x minus 3. And now, anytime we have the same binomial twice, we can write it as x minus 3 squared. And that's our goal, is that we have this because we're going to end up taking the square roots of those tomorrow. All right, last one, at least in this section. We have x squared minus 2x plus blank. We need to find the number that goes here. So we're going to have our b value divided by 2 squared. Negative 2 divided by 2 gives me negative 1 squared. Negative 1 squared gives me a positive 1. I'm going to rewrite this. X squared minus 2x plus 1. So now we need to factor it. So it's going to add to give me a negative 2. But when I multiply to give me a positive 1. Guys, I want you to notice something, that when we look for these numbers, we actually already know what that number is. It's always going to be that b value divided by 2. So 8 divided by 2 gave me 4, and guess what? Those were the 4s I was looking for. Negative 6 divided by 2 gave me negative 3. Notice the negative 3 were the numbers I was looking for. Here, we did negative 2 divided by 2 gave me negative 1, and guess what? Negative 1 plus negative 1 gives me negative 2. Negative 1 times negative 1 gives me a positive 1. So that's the number I'm looking for. So it's going to be x minus 1 and then x minus 1. Well, then we want to write it in our correct way as x minus 1 squared. All right, same process in the next section. If you're working ahead, that is totally fine. Just make sure you're checking your work so you can make sure you're good to go. So just like we just did, write the c value that completes the square. So that's when we're going to do 14 divided by 2, and we're going to square it. 14 divided by 2 gives me 7. Remember, that's that special number we're going to need, squared. 7 squared gives me 49. So that's my number I'm plugging in. Now we're going to rewrite this as x squared plus 4x plus 49. Now we need to factor the perfect square trinomial. So we need to think what's going to add to give me 14. I don't know why this line's in the middle of this section. But we'll multiply to 49. Remember, we already know the number, because remember, that's that number where our b value divided by 2 is 7. And guess what? 7 plus 7 gives me 14. 7 times 7 gives me 49. Yay! So then we'll have x plus 7 and x plus 7. And now we can rewrite this as x plus 7 squared. Because remember, tomorrow we're going to be taking the square roots of those, just like we did in the warm-up. Get excited. All right, or not, it's fine. So look at number 2. We have x squared plus 20x plus. We need to find the c value that goes there. So we're doing 20 divided by 2 squared. Well, 20 divided by 2 gives me 10 squared. And 10 squared is 100. Well, now we need to factor it. So I'm going to rewrite it just so it's easier to work with. I need to think what's going to add to give me 20, but multiply to give me 100. Well, just like last time, we already found that number. It'd be 10 and 10. And guys, guess what? If you already know that, you don't have to write this out every single time. If you're comfortable without it, don't worry about it. So we got x plus 10 and x plus 10. And honestly, guys, you're probably going to get to the point where you find this number and you're going to automatically jump right down to doing x plus 10 squared. And that is okay. Okay, that is totally fine. If you're comfortable skipping from here down to here, totally okay. I'm 100% okay with it. Okay, so thinking of that, we've got x squared minus 10x. Okay, we want to create our binomial squared. So we're going to start with our b value. We're going to have negative 10 divided by 2 squared. Well, negative 10 divided by 2 gives me negative 5 squared. Some of you are going to be comfortable with jumping down here and writing this as x minus 5 squared, and that is okay. I'm going to show you all the steps in between, just because you know I like to do that. So I'll have negative 5 squared gives me 25. So I'm going to write this as x squared minus 10x plus 25. Think what's going to add to give me a negative 10, but multiply to give me 25. Well, we already said that that's going to be negative 5 and negative 5. Okay, so then I can write that as x minus 5 and x minus 5, which, guess what, is negative 5 squared. Alrighty, you can go ahead and skip to your homework. Guess what? It's more of this stuff. Okay, so it should be short, sweet, and to the point. Make sure you're sending me pictures of the front and back. Guys, I cannot check your homework without pictures of the front and the back. Alright, if you have any questions, make sure you're emailing me.